which are tax dollars, but they're limited for library use only. And why they can only be used for the library. Why? It would be impossible for the average resident to make a knowledgeable response to the supposedly simple question of, and that's what's being proposed at some point, do you favor a library in Holbrook Palmer Park? And use that response to the question as an indication of what would best serve the needs of the Atherton community. It is precisely for this reason that Council appointed a steering committee which has studied this issue now for more than 2 years, with meetings, sometimes 2-3 meetings a week, all of which have been publicly noticed, together with experts, and authorize the extensive and expensive, it's going to be $155,000 plus, if it's approved tonight, public outreach EIR process, which will take a minimum of 6 to 8 months, with multiple opportunities, scoping, hearings for the public to have input. That's the opportunity for public input. All that money to become out of library funds. It is precisely for that reason that representative democracies were formed to enable citizens to put their trust in elected officials. That's our job, to study those issues and all those myriad points that I referred to, and dozens more. Number 4, the questions asked can clearly affect the results. For example, what if I were to propose that there be a poll of the town's registered voters to determine if they wanted a new town center? And the question were to be posed as, do you want a $6 to $10 million town center to be built, which does not include council chambers, even though there continues to be uncertainty regarding high-speed rail, and even though the actual number of town employees might be uncertain due to the potential outsourcing of town services? How likely is it that such a measure would pass? Not likely at all. 5, who gets to review the questions and determine the results, or how the results are utilized and ultimately delivered to the public? When the survey for the police, if you remember Chief Brennan and his pen and constantly referring to the 98% satisfaction rate, when that survey was proposed, and I was part of that whole survey process, the police department insisted that it be able to review and amend the questions, as well as have considerable input as to how the results were to be assessed. You may not know, not all the results were used. They selected certain results from different age groups and different demographics, and only some of those results were used to come up with that satisfaction rate and what you were actually shown. The police chief and others from the police department met and spoke often with the survey company and attended the meetings at which the survey questions and the method for evaluating the results were discussed. 6, the fact that the library issue has become so politicized means that a survey will likely be politicized as well. How many people will be responding based on perceived social pressures? How likely is it that a huge amount of misinformation and biased information, including that which has been circulated by one of the town's own committees, which has had to be taken off of the town's website, will adversely affect or skew results? 7, are surveys the appropriate vehicle for making decisions regarding the future of a town? If surveys were the means to enact this kind of change, it's likely that many of our finest iconic institutions and monuments would not exist. The National Park System, Central Park, the Golden Gate Bridge, Golden Gate Park, the Vietnam War Memorial. The decision regarding the library is not one merely for today. It is for future generations. Those future generations are without a voice, and they must rely on the foresight of elected officials to make a prudent decision for the future of all concerned. Undoubtedly, some of the issues that I've mentioned can be ameliorated to some degree. Clearly, you can go in and request an additional survey for your spouse who disagrees with you adamantly. Or you can send a survey to each registered voter. You can say that we're going to have an extensive educational campaign. How many people in Atherton are really going to become apprised of that campaign? How many people are going to read the literature? How many people are really going to get into the detail that's required? But the problem of surveys lies with all of the issues I've enumerated, not merely one standing alone. We know now that Little League is in the park. Yet according to the survey, a mere margin of 23 people expressed a preference that it be allowed here. By today's standards, some would say that that number is insufficient by which to determine the will of the people. And it might well have gone the other way. 23 is too small a margin by which to ascertain will. Yet who would deny that it has worked? The town council carefully considered all of the ramifications of the matter and it voted yes. The town council decided there was no clear voice of the people. That's the job of the town council. That is the job of good government, to digest complex issues on behalf of the people and to do what it thinks is right. Thank you.
So I won't repeat a lot of the comments that Councilmember McKeithen said, although some of my comments are very similar. I do want to point out that, as she pointed out, over the last 2 years there's been open meetings and there have been community outreaches, and the next agenda item is going to have even more community outreaches where the community will come in, will be asked to come in, provide their input, not just on the preferred location, the park, but on multiple locations. So the community is going to have their say one way or the other. Now I know there's a lot of talk about surveys. There's a lot of things perhaps we should be surveying. I think a lot of people in the town wanted an ethics committee and several council members didn't want to spend $10,000 of potential staff time to put one together, so we don't have one. There are a lot of other things. There have been changes here to the Little League. So once the Little League got into the park, then they've made things more and more permanent. The park committee didn't come back and say, shall we do that? Shall we do this? So I've lived here for 15 years and I can't remember any surveys really from the town other than from the library. I've asked the town to provide me the town documents on that and they cannot find them. So there may have been all these surveys that some of the residents are saying that they've always done when they were on the council, but I can't find many people who actually have documented proof that they're out there. I submit to you that a lot of the discussions around here is about keeping the library where it is so it helps to fund activities for the new town center, and I think that that's wrong. Now, as the mayor already pointed out, we voted on this once, and it's time to stop spending additional time on it. We've made the decision, and we need to move forward as a council. If the community wants to energize itself and put something on the ballot, so be it. Then we'll spend some money on that, and while we're doing it, we might as well go ahead and vote on an ethics committee, etc.
Public comment? No, it's my turn.
Elizabeth?
You can have a seat, you know, then he's going to have, then Mayor Donnie's going to speak. So, so this item is on the agenda because it was overlooked by the city manager. We do have policies that when a commission or committee votes to recommend something to council, it needs to be put on the agenda as an agendized discussion topic. And it wasn't put on last month, and so here we are. And it is because the Park and Rec Commission, which is a long-standing commission in our town, membered by very esteemed members of our community, listened to 2 presentations by the Library Steering Committee about their proposal to put the library in the park. And then at the final meeting, October 5th, they said, we are not going to recommend that the library go in the park. We're going to recommend to council that they do a survey, a town-wide resident survey about whether the location in the park is acceptable or desirable. And in my opinion, that's a very reasonable recommendation and one that council should adopt. The members of the Park and Rec Commission have served on this commission for many years, and their opinion should be listened to. They should be valued as members of our community who have the best interests in mind of the town and the park, and we should not be turning a deaf ear to them. At our most recent October regular council meeting, Councilmember McKeithen did state, and it's in the minutes, and I'm going to quote her, that she says she's always tried to do what is best for the general well-being of the town, and that if the park were ever deemed to not be the right location for the library, between now and the time a shovel is put in the ground, she would be the first to stop the process. Well, she's not trying to stop the process. She's trying to get the process going. It has been very obvious in the last few weeks, month, that a majority, I can't say majority because the majority hasn't been polled, but many, many residents have come up and said, we need to slow down the process of putting the library in the park. We need to do a survey or a master plan. And I think that we need to listen to those residents. I have always said that the park could be the perfect location. I've always said that if that's the will of the people, I will get behind it. I just don't believe that the process has been full-blown enough to allow enough residents to weigh in on the opinion. I think that it is critical that we as publicly elected officials give our residents the opportunity to express their opinions, especially on major decisions like this. We have the opportunity to do the right thing tonight and to honor and respect our members of the Park and Rec Commission by accepting their simple recommendation of conducting a straightforward, non-political, non-biased survey about residents' views on whether or not they want the library in the park. It's not about whether or not we want a library or need a library or can afford a library. It's about the process of where to put the library. And I take considerable affront from Councilmember Widmer's accusations that in some way, shape, or form, the Town Center Task Force is trying to pigeonhole the library in its existing place, or for the simple reason of accelerating or enhancing the Town Center building project. That is not the case, and I've said that over and over. The library funds are for the library. The outcry over the last few weeks to conduct a master plan or a survey is very clear. Even one of our most watchdog, outspoken residents, Peter Carpenter, sent a letter to council, and I'm going to read it because I don't think it's been publicly circulated. He says, I know discussions regarding the location of the new library. This issue is and will become even more divisive and more personal if it continues to be dealt with by the council. Therefore, I recommend that the council place this issue in its simplest form before the electorate for their decision. He then further indicated in a follow-up email that if we don't do it voluntarily, that the residents do have the option of getting a referendum, a petition, a grassroots petition signed that would be much less let's see, however, I believe that it would be much less divisive and more elegant if the council took the leadership on placing the matter before the voters. That's leadership. When you see conflict in your town, when you see a potential that is going to rip apart the fabric of our town, the leadership comes to try to mend it and not continue to cut through and make it more divisive. That's what leaders are. I believe that we as council, I implore my fellow council members to put aside all of our differences, our own personal agendas, and listen to the people. I really, really implore you to listen to the people, listen to our Park and Recs Commission, and do a simple, straightforward survey about where to put the library.
I would remind everybody that at the last council meeting, the council did vote to put the library in the park, subject to the satisfactory EIR. I would also like to point out that some of the weaknesses of a survey you saw at the last council meeting, where one of our residents actually conducted their own survey. The survey questions were clearly biased. It was only sent to certain people, and obviously you could vote in that survey 5 or 6 times if you so wanted. So clearly, one of the weaknesses of a survey like that shows you that the results were totally meaningless. So I would just say at this stage, I would ask for public comment.
Karen Bliss, 97 Jennings Lane. I'd like to make 2 comments this evening. First, I think the idea of sending out a survey to everyone in the town about the library site is a waste of time. Unless someone attended one of our, okay, thank you. One of our 3 meetings discussing the pros and cons of the site options, or studiously read the report prepared by the steering committee on the town website, they cannot possibly make an informed decision about which site is best. It's a complicated issue. I am sure that if you had surveyed the town about the outsourcing of our Building and Public Works Department, the majority of people would have been against it because they did not know the compelling financial reasons for doing so. These are all complicated issues. They can't be decided by a public referendum. It is the job of the city council to gather all the information surrounding any issue facing the town, listen to input from its citizens, and make a decision. Why do we vote these people into a job if we don't want them to do this? The council did that in October when they voted to pick Holbrook Palmer Park as the preferred library site. They reiterated their support of that position at last week's meeting as well. It is time to move on and not keep trying to change that decision. For those who disagree with the council, they can always exhibit their right to the next election to throw the bums out. Secondly, I think it is time for a town to clean up its act. I'm embarrassed to live in Atherton. The good news about Atherton is it is a town full of very successful people. The bad news is that they think they know more than anybody else and are used to getting their own way. These traits are not a good basis for consensus building and trying to move forward on important issues facing our town. Lately, I think some of the behavior in this town has been downright shameful. The fact that any individual would send out a biased survey to a select group of people, their friends, and have them fill it in many times to exaggerate the desired results, that's shameful. The fact that after the council vote in October approving Holbrook Palmer Park as the preferred site for the library, those council members who didn't get their way threatened lawsuits and recalls against those who voted for it, that's shameful. What are we doing here? For many years, I have kidded my friends in Menlo Park about the foibles of their elected officials. Well, they're getting back at me big time. I would like to see us reverse that trend. Our town deserves it. Thank you.
Earl Nielsen, Burns Avenue, resident for 40 years. The building steering committee is composed of Kathy McKeithen, so she has pride and ownership in what they produced. But it's Kathy McKeithen, a board member on the committee. Denise Kupperman, chairman of some of the library activities. I got up to speak at one of the information activities that she chaired. She would not let us ask questions. She said, oh, we've got 6 tables around there, you go ask questions there. But as a large group, we were interested in what was going on. Karen Bliss, member of the committee, she just was here. Sandy Crittenden, Marion Oster. Then there are 2 alternates, Joan Sanders, Ginny Nile. Then 2 other people were featured as being really supportive of this committee and working with this committee, Pat Doby and Jim Doby. Good that they work together. But there's pride of ownership that's incorporated in this endorsement of it. Now, did I hear you incorrectly, Mr. Whitmer, that you say library funds are going to be used for the town center?
There was a discussion at the October meeting where we were twice told by one resident who used to be on the council, as well as it was mentioned if we resigned from the JPA, maybe we can reuse the funds. So, yes.
They can't be used for the town center, for the library.
disagree.
Okay, so I think I endorse having the survey of the community. Whoever gets the top vote, we all go for it. But I hear people speaking about we can't trust the intelligence of Atherton? You're kidding. Boy, I walk through the neighborhood and talk to these people about different things, most intelligent people I know. Think of your community and your neighbors, let them decide. Thank you.
Who's next?
Go ahead.
I have to lower this, I'm vertically challenged, okay? I would like to address a couple of comments that have been made tonight, and I do understand and respect the Park and Rec Commission, and I've worked with them for many years, and I've attended more of their meetings than any single resident, I believe. The City Council had decided to ignore the recommendation of the Park and Rec Commission when the City Council voted and approved the Little League field. And it was a very divisive issue, and I think today we're all very happy that we have a lot of happy children playing in the Little League field. The Park and Rec Commission had recommended that the backstop not be left up. And the council decided that that was a good idea. The Park and Rec Commission had made a decision many, many years ago that it was not a good idea to have a playground in this park. And the City Council actually decided that yes, a playground might be a good idea in a public park. So while I do have a great respect for their work and what they do, I do know and understand that there is great precedent in the City Council making decisions contrary to the decisions of the Park and Rec Commission. I would like to go on. I put this here. I need to read. And this is from an article that I read today, and it's by a New York Times columnist, and his name is Thomas Friedman. And the title is, "Will the Decider Please Stand Up?" And I think that almost says it all. And leaders are so attuned to every nuance of public opinion, that they find it hard to make any big decisions that require sacrifice, and in this instance, it seems political sacrifice. Yes, it's true that in this hyper-connected world and in the age of Facebook, Twitter, the people are more empowered and a lot more ideas bubble up, and not just from the top down. And that's a really good thing. But at the end of the day, whether you are a president, a senator, a mayor, or on a steering committee of your local Occupy Wall Street, someone needs to meld those ideas into a vision of how to move forward and then sculpt them into policies that can make a difference in people's lives, and then build a majority to deliver them. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Walter Sleeth, 227 Catalpa Drive. I'm a resident for over 20 years here in Atherton. With all due respect to the dissenting council members, public uproar and outcry is not who can be the loudest. Large number is questionable in light of the statistical issues which have already been raised. This issue has gone on ad nauseum. You have already voted in favor of a preferred site. The quiet majority of residents believe if the environmental impact statement is completed, there is sufficient protection that a survey vote is a waste of town resources. I agree with the rational position stated by Council Member Kathy McKeithen, and I think we should go ahead with this. Thank you very much.
Charles?
Charles Marsala, 33 Emily. Obviously, there's a lot of points that we can make on both sides of this issue, I see. Councilmember McKeithen pointed out that we wouldn't have the Vietnam War Memorial or the Golden Gate Bridge if we had to do surveys. However, being from New Orleans, we voted on the Superdome. Being in San Jose, we voted on HP Pavilion. In Santa Clara, they voted on the ballpark. They voted on AT&T Park. My understanding is the cities vote on issues. Government nationwide, we don't. So this is a city issue, and I look at that differently than voting on a memorial to go on public land or the thing with something else. The survey to say that somebody has 1,600 friends and only had their friends vote on the recent survey, I think is wrong. No one has 1,600 friends. We can question the validity of that recent survey that went out electronically, but the fact is only 30% of the people were in favor of putting the library in the park. And that 1,600 people is a pretty good sample to say it probably would carry out, or it's worth paying attention to. Because the other survey that we had was done in the library. And more than half of those people don't live in Atherton. So when I say that we have to make a decision for the future of residents who don't live here, or can't vote on this, we're making a decision about putting a library here that's going to be used more for people that don't live in Atherton, by more people that don't live in Atherton, by the people that do live in Atherton. And the public should know that. And we can inform people on a survey, on a ballot measure. You can have a pro and a con. It's pretty simple. When people run for office, or we've had the parcel tax. Somebody writes why you should vote for the parcel tax, somebody writes why you shouldn't. And you get a rebuttal on each one, and it's pretty clear. You get an informed decision. Park and Rec, when we did this 50-50 ballot measure or survey years ago, and I know Bill, I have some of these surveys, so I'll try to get them to you because they do exist. The Elmwood survey on the park a few years back, the Little League survey, it was 50-50, gave the council some input to know that, well, if the foundation and the Danes don't want it and the town wants it, maybe we're okay. And what town council approved was different from what Park and Rec voted against. The field was going to be over there, and it was moved over to there by the council, so it changed what Park and Rec had opposed. The 3-2 vote right now, probably if you go back the last 20 years, might have been a 2-3 vote, but if you look at who was on the council prior to the current makeup we have. So to decide this by one vote is, I think, the wrong thing to do, and we should pay attention to what Park and Rec is saying, and let's go ahead and do the survey. It may be the best thing that happens, and as the information gets out there, why the park is the place for the library, great. But if it doesn't, we should accept that. And there's nothing about funds. I mean, leave that out. No one was talking about that. This town center existed 15 years ago before there were any funds in a library thing. And it's still going to exist. So there's no one saying to use the funds, and that's a red herring, I believe, to discredit people.
Are there any other public comments?
Valerie Gardner, McCormick Lane. Unlike Karen, I'm not embarrassed to live in this town. I love living in this town, like 80% of the people who responded to the resident survey. What does embarrass me, however, is when a sanctioned committee makes a sham out of the community input process that they are supposed to have conducted. The library steering committee has probably spent $100,000 or something in that neighborhood to get community input. The reason they're getting community input is because they were required to by Resolution 1030 in 2010. Because at that time the council said no, the council is not going to decide where the library goes. The community should have a say. So 1 year ago, Councilmember McKeithen, not 2 years ago, 1 year ago, a new committee was formed. It has many of the same people who believe the same thing, but a new committee was formed for the purpose of getting community input. And so we've been told that surveys don't work and community workshops people don't show up to. But in fact, the committee did not conduct a survey. They decided to hold 3 focus groups and 3 workshops. And the 3 focus groups that they conducted, one had 6 moms and a nanny. One had 30 students comprised of juniors and sophomores, only one of whom had ever been to our library. And the 3rd focus group that they conducted was of themselves and what space they wanted. In not one of those focus groups did they even ask the question, where should the library be? Or at least if they did ask it, they didn't report any findings from it. The 3 community workshops that they held, the room was pretty full. There were a lot of consultants here. I was at one of them. There were a lot of objections about putting the library in the park. I asked to see what the summary of their findings were from these workshops, and I didn't get them. And I've asked Denise twice, and I've asked a consultant.
They're in a binder this big in a library.
You said they were posted on the internet, and they're not.
The detail. The summary is on the website, the detail of every single
The
question,
summary is not on the
every single
website.
comment.
I would like to
Binder
see
this
the
big.
detail. I've
Go to
never
library.
found it. Okay, so some of the information about what residents had to say about the library in the park has not been reported.
You were on this committee for over a year.
Right.
Why didn't you bring this
Excuse
up?
me,
And
we can
I would
only
also
have
like
one
to say-
speaker at this time. So, if you want to come back and say something else, that's fine, but, Valerie, hopefully you're going to finish soon, your time is up.
Okay, I'd like to just finish up by saying that this committee did not choose to do a survey. They did not choose to send out community email to the largest community email list in the town. And they seem to be making a concerted effort not to collect input from the community. And I think that that says something about the integrity of the process, and I am objecting to it. That's what I'm saying.
I'd like to make one more comment, and it's about process.
Who are you?
My name is Denise Kupperman. I live at 74 Atherton Avenue, and I'm the chair of the Atherton Steering Committee, and I've been a very long time member of the Atherton Tree Committee. Our findings are in a binder that is this thick, that's in the library. And I have mentioned this a number of times, and I would like to repeat that, Valerie, if you'd like to go to the library, it is there. The summary of the findings is on the website. Every single question that was asked at the community meetings was documented. And there is on the website a list of questions called frequently asked questions. And there are answers to some of the questions, and there are maybe not answers to others because we might not have the answers. But we made every effort to address and to record people's impressions and questions. In terms of process, and being unbiased, I would like to draw everybody's attention to the fact that the survey that went out on the town's broadest website is a website that is a town website with the EPC. We announced our meetings, and they did not state a position one way or another, but only the location of the meeting, the time, the place, and the purpose on the town's website, and that notice goes out through the town clerk. We have had surveys and announcements, the announcement for this meeting tonight, that went out through the Athertonian email list. And access to that is moderated. We did not have access. And the announcement for this evening's meeting was not unbiased. We have tried to make our announcements unbiased and using what we have available to us as a committee, which is the email list that is available through the town clerk. There are other members of this community that have an email list that is moderated, and it is their opinion that gets communicated. And that's really all I have to say on the matter. This is getting into being silly season. And I almost wore my silly hat tonight, and it's enough.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll take a whack.
Scott Mitchell, 158 Green Oaks Drive. I think this whole meeting is a microcosm of what's happening in our country. I'm an architect and a planner. I have planning background. I just want to reiterate what I said at the last meeting. I don't see how you guys can plan for this project without taking into account everything else that's going on in terms of capital expenditures. The police department, the building department, the planning department, the library,